Good morning and welcome to the NBA Daily for January 29th, 2025. Coming up, De'Aaron Fox is on the trade block. The Rockets survive yet another crazy fourth quarter. And we got Anthony Slater to break down the latest on De'Aaron Fox and talk about the Warriors' options at the trade deadline. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Zena.
Morning,
before
Dave.
we get started, I heard, Zena, that you guys have something kind of amazing happening over on the Athletic Women's Basketball Show, which, of course, you're one of the hosts of, which I don't think we say enough. What is actually going on the show this week?
Yeah, we're doing something a little different. I mean, typically I go on with our writers. We talk about what's going on in college, what's going on in WNBA, whatever's going on around the world of women's basketball. But we like to have these kind of athlete, all access type of editions. And we're doing something really new and different. We have actually a narrative story coming out about a pivotal player at Notre Dame. Notre Dame being one of the top college women's basketball teams in the country. And right now in the center of their whole thing is a freshman post player named Kate Koval. And she's a top prospect going in and already making her mark, but she's got a crazy story. She's actually pursuing a pro career after leaving her home country of Ukraine, as it's in the middle of a war, obviously with Russia. Many of you know. And we spoke to her exclusively about what her experience has been, what her family struggle has been like. And it's a really touching story and a really special story. And I'm excited for you guys to listen to it.
Yeah, we're excited here. We actually have included an excerpt of the episode at the end of this one. If you guys like it, go and check out the Athletic Women's Basketball Show wherever you listen to podcasts. Give the full episode a listen. It's not very often that we get a chance to do this sort of narrative stuff on a podcast. The Athletic is built on narrative. So please go and check that out over at the Athletic Women's Basketball Show. Zena, we've got some new trade deadline news. It's not even slop because it's coming from Sam Amick, guys. Sam Amick is reporting that the Sacramento Kings have opened up trade talks for De'Aaron Fox. Sam is also reporting that De'Aaron Fox's preferred destination would be the San Antonio Spurs to pair up with Victor Wembanyama. And I would like to hang out with Megan Thee Stallion. I have dreams too. De'Aaron Fox would probably have a great career if he got to play with Victor Wembanyama for the next 10 years. I love it for him. Zena, what do you think about De'Aaron Fox?
I mean, just imagine what that pick and roll would look like. Someone with the first step of De'Aaron Fox having the opportunity to go off of a big screener like a Wemby and then have Wemby pop in out to the three or the short roll as an option. I mean, it's dangerous what could happen for the Spurs offense specifically. And then on top of that, I mean, we can't act as if there's not all these other pieces around Wemby that could also spur something. Pun intended, spur something going for the Spurs. Like Stephon Castle is so exciting to play with right now. Imagine De'Aaron and him in the backcourt. There's a lot of good that can happen from him potentially going to the Spurs. But right now, Dave, my thoughts are with Sacramento. Because when you think about what De'Aaron Fox has meant to the Sacramento fan base, what he's meant to that team since he was drafted in 2017, right now, Domantas Sabonis would not be with the Kings if it had not been for Fox. DeMar DeRozan wouldn't have signed in the offseason if it wasn't for Fox. Malik Monk, his Kentucky teammate, signed for less money to stay with Fox.
That's right.
And now they've been 10-4 since Doug Christie took over at the helm and De'Aaron wants out. That's demoralizing for Sacramento overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's more about, I would say, with De'Aaron Fox, he just doesn't want to be in Sacramento. And if you're the Sacramento Kings, you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, well, we could hang on to him. Maybe we make a trade in the offseason. But you can maximize the value by moving now because he gets to make a playoff push with whatever team picks him up. And he's currently, in my estimation, the most valuable player available on the trade market that anyone can get, because this guy is ready to compete now. If the Spurs get him, you've got great point of attack defense with him. You mentioned Stephon Castle. If he, depending on who they have to send out in a trade. But with Wemby and De'Aaron Fox, you've got two pieces of what I think is a playoff team next year instantly, whether they make a march this year or not. But I think that's a playoff team next year for sure. And then you start saying, well, depending on what the pieces they keep around them and with the growth that they've had, I don't know. It's going to get really exciting really fast in San Antonio if they pull this off. We're going to talk to Anthony Slater after the break because, of course, he covers the Sacramento Kings along with the Warriors and, the rest of the league. And he's got more info on De'Aaron Fox. So we're going to save it for after the break. Zena, we got to talk about our Rockets because back-to-back, and it didn't matter. We watched this game together, and we were talking. We were like, man, the Rockets just look kind of tired tonight. The Hawks, Trae Young's out there. They were running on them. But, man, the Rockets, they gave us another one of these crazy fourth quarters. They built up a really nice lead, and then they let Atlanta get back into it, and it's close at the end. But finally, Amen Thompson, actually, once again, finishes the game off with an assist to Alperen Şengün, breaking the Atlanta Hawks press to finally put the game away. But how about these Rockets? They just never stop fighting.
I really love
literally
the fact that,
and metaphorically in the game.
I was just going to say, Bad Boy Rockets were on display a little bit during that Atlanta game as well. But I love the fact that this is now 2 games in a row that Amen Thompson gets to display just how crucial and valuable that he is to this team. Obviously, with that big scoring career high game against Boston. And then also in this game, really showing up more defensively in this game. But then the switch off was Jalen Green.
Yes.
It was like, if you want to showcase who's the most athletic on this team, is it Amen? Is it Jalen Green? The way that he was getting to the paint, finishing above defenders, above the rim. I mean, it was fun to watch him. Now, Houston does have an issue of blowing leads. They blew a 16-point lead, and it came down in the fourth quarter. But luckily for them, I mean, Atlanta went on a 4-minute drought. Then Houston went on a 4-minute drought. But again, luckily for them, they had Jalen Green to kind of pull them out of it. Dave, I don't know. I'm looking at the fact that Houston took care of business against the Celtics. Mm-hmm. They took care of business against the Cavs twice. Mm-hmm. And now, yes, this is now 6 games in a row for Atlanta that they've lost. But Atlanta is a good team.
Yeah, they're tough.
And they're tough. And I'm looking at Houston like they're a pretty formidable second seed in the West.
Houston's good. That game that they're going to play on Thursday night against the Grizzlies, and we're going to have Kelly Iko after that game. We have to. That game is crucial. They're about to maybe sweep the Grizzlies. Now, I think that they could have Memphis's number. I mean, when you think about, again, it's another team. They've got a lot of size and length on the wings that they can throw at Ja Morant and Desmond Bane. It really bothers those guys. And so, this matchup on Thursday, I think, is fascinating, but the Rockets have really, like you said, they've submitted themselves as the second best team. And we've got news from our own Kelly Iko that they are not going to be involved in the De'Aaron Fox sweepstakes at all. They like this team. They want to see where it can go on its own. And don't forget, they got Reed Shepherd, not playing on this team.
In the G League.
Right.
Playing in the G League, yeah.
They've got pieces, yeah.
Yeah, I think Ime Udoka proved how much he's rocking with his team by the fact that they just played a crazy game against the Celtics and were clearly tired tonight. And Ime Udoka was like, play through it. They were still, having to play through it in the first half. But I think there's something that's going to be apparent against the Memphis Grizzlies, and that's going to be Houston's ability to disrupt. We've been talking about Memphis's offense being a lot more read-oriented this year than ever before. And when you look at what they did against Atlanta, they kept Atlanta to just 19 assists last night. Atlanta averages 29 assists. They've got the wings to be able to wrap those passes through and get through, but not against Houston. Yeah. So I think that will be Houston's saving grace against Grizzlies, is just being able to disrupt whatever offensive rhythm they're trying to get going.
Quickly before we go to break, the Lakers had what can only be called an embarrassing loss. It's second night of a back-to-back, but in my opinion, Zena, this is the second night of a back-to-back where the Lakers showed pretty low effort. I mean, they had the Charlotte game that should have just been a blowout. This should have been a blowout against the Sixers. Only Tyrese Maxey out there really for the Sixers. Well, Maxey puts up 43, has a huge game.
Yep.
AD gets hurt, doesn't come back, and all of a sudden the Lakers drop one that they should have won.
Yeah. I mean, Philadelphia had a season high, in points in the second quarter and points in the first half. And that was also Tyrese Maxey's high of points in the second quarter. But what happened in the second quarter? First quarter, AD goes out. Your rim defender, your rim protector goes out, abdominal strain. Second quarter, top of the second quarter, your best second defender, Dorian Finney-Smith, had 4 fouls. this is going to be an issue that is recurring for the Lakers. If AD is not in between Dorian Finney-Smith and Jackson Hayes, the defense has to be better. It's got to be less sloppy, especially on the second nights of back-to-back. I looked this up. Dorian Finney-Smith averages about 1.8 fouls per game on any given night. When there's no days of rest, 3 fouls a game. Right? So it's just like, that's significant. That's not a small number. Like, you got to clean it up, especially because this is not going to be your last back-to-back. There's going to be games like this in the playoffs, right? So you got to make sure that you're clean about it. And it was so obvious that Philadelphia was like, oh, you don't have any defenders. Go at the basket all day long. It was easy.
We had another blowout, by the way. Unexpected. Another team that's supposed to be bad that beat another team that's supposed to be good. The Blazers. How about those Blazers? Chauncey Billups deserves some credit. He called those guys. He said, don't be losers when they lost 3 games in a row a couple months ago. And you know what? They are not losers. Denny Avdia continues to have an excellent season. He follows up that game against OKC the other night where he had 28, 8-8, scores 30. Zena, he's shooting the ball with confidence. He's tying the offense together. He's defending the rim. Denny Avdia, I mean, he's been good, but I mean, this is kind of a different level from him.
Isn't Portland's motto is keep Portland weird? And I do find it weird. They're keeping it weird, okay? Because I do find it strange that we're not talking more about Denny Avdia. The way that he is a floor general and also with size, he can push the ball up in like less than 5 bounces, gets into the paint and then distributes well. And what was so pretty about his game tonight is that he kept setting up, even though he only had 2 assists, which was crazy, he kept setting up his teammates and particularly Anthony Simons, who looked like Damian Lillard out there. The way that he was pulling up in traffic in transition and just hitting some shots. I mean, he had Chris Middleton.
He was going at Dame too.
Yeah, he was going at Dame too. And it was crazy that at the end of the game, he was saying to Stephanie Reddy that he works out with Dame in the summer and that a lot of his success could be attributed to Dame Lillard. I'm like, sir, you look at his game on the court. It reminds you of someone. It reminds you of Agent Zero. And it was really fun to watch the two of them go at it. It's been fun to watch that entire team. We also haven't even talked about Toumani Camara. And that is my Malian West African brother showing up. Okay. Putting all of his athletic ability on display. He's one of the best defenders in the league that no one's talking about.
That's right.
He's constantly disrupting things, hands in passing lanes, making things difficult for the best opponents across from him. I mean, he is so much fun to watch. And that's the entire team. Shaden Sharp, Toumani Camara, DeAndre Ayton, Donovan Clingan coming off the bench. I mean, I'm having a lot of fun watching the little hidden gem up in the Northwest that is Portland.
They got a lot of guys.
Pay attention to them on League Pass, y'all. You'll have fun.
They got a lot of guys and they're doing some stuff. Guys, stick around after the break. We got Anthony Slater to talk about the latest on De'Aaron Fox. And what are the Warriors going to do at the deadline, Zena?
Great question.
We're just over a week away from the NBA trade deadline, and the Warriors win a game last night to bring themselves to 500 without Steph Curry and Draymond Green. So we needed to get Anthony Slater in here to kind of give us a preview of what the Warriors may or may not do at the deadline. Anthony, I hope you're doing well. What can you give us, man? The Warriors clearly need help. They need some more good players, preferably one really good one. They need a number 2.
Yeah, are they going to go get?
Yeah, them. Are you breaking that right here?
Sure. They're interested. If Giannis were to become available, sources tell me they would be interested.
Yes. All right. So who is on their radar that you know of that actually makes sense? I mean, Giannis, of course, makes sense, but I don't think it's realistic. So is it just Jimmy Butler or bust for them?
No.
Okay.
And, they've been like pretty actively uninterested in Jimmy Butler early on in this process, especially when the price tag seemed higher. I think with the desperation of this moment and the thought looking across the country and seeing, how devolved that situation has turned into, like how low will that price tag go? You hear varying things when you talk across the league right now about the Warriors kind of nudging themselves back in the mix, wondering like, again, how low a price are we talking here? But even if the price is we're talking no picks, none of their young players. You still got to give up a lot of, your rotation guys. So it's not nothing, right? It's Wiggins plus, name your expiring salaries. It's something they certainly would bounce around in-house, and I expect them to over the next week to at least think about it. But again, depending on who you talk to, like, inside wise, they're kind of downplaying this idea that they're, beating down Miami's door and are suddenly have become the front runner. We'll see. Again, this is smoke screen season. But to your earlier question, what players potentially could they look at? I mean, Vucevic is a name we've all been talking about for a couple of weeks. I mean, I've been hearing this really back since December because stretch 5 is such an obvious need. Now you've seen Quentin Post kind of step into that role. In some ways, might have people go, hey, look, you don't need to go get Vucevic. You kind of got a younger, version. But the reality is all Post is showing you is what a stretch 5 can do for this offense, can do for Steph Curry. Price tag will be the big thing there. Warriors don't really want to use a first on that. Chicago might want one. Where does that, come up in the deadline? I think me and Marcus Thompson are likely going to have a story in the morning breaking some of this down. And essentially from what I've heard from the Warriors front is I do believe that their pick this year is somewhat on the table, 2025 protected version of that pick. And as far as Vucevic goes, I do think he's going to be kind of down the pecking order, where it's something that might get done closer to the deadline rather than currently, because I do think there's a lot of stuff league wide, these dominoes that are playing out that I think they want to check in on before maybe hitting full throttle on a move like that.
Well, I'm happy you mentioned the league-wide aspect because, of course, Steph Curry's protege, De'Aaron Fox, has been a new name thrown around. Not necessarily someone I would think of as a number 2 in Golden State, but particularly someone that definitely shakes up the market overall for a lot of folks. I know you've got that news, and Sam Amick's been talking about it. What's going on with the De'Aaron Fox situation and the destination we're hearing that he might want to go to?
Yeah, it's been trending this way for a while, like he really back to the summer, which we reported in the summer, he turned down an extension, which that signals something to a franchise when he's saying, hey, let's take 2 steps back. Let's not take this massive money offer you're giving me because I want to see where this is going long term. It was a wobbly start to the season. Sure, they fired Mike Brown, but they did it in kind of a sloppy way that didn't necessarily, please De'Aaron Fox. Kangs. It doesn't seem. Yeah. They've had an 11-3 stretch. They've kind of turned their season around to at least be somewhat of a legitimate playoff threat. But that doesn't seem to have solved the bigger picture issue of where this is all going and where De'Aaron Fox seems to be directing it to go. And you mentioned it. All signs point to San Antonio as his preferred destination for one 7'4", 7'5", very obvious reason. He would seem to profile as a very nice complementary number 2 pick and roll partner into the future. It's clear De'Aaron Fox is intent on getting to a place where he believes he can build into, with a core into a regular, contender. But there's a lot of boxes to check along the way, and he has 1.5 years left on his contract. So there's a level of leverage that the Kings have, and today seemed like a little bit of a speed up process potentially even from the Fox side, and we'll see if anything happens in the next week. Because again, I said it, despite De'Aaron Fox's clear desires at this point, the Kings do hold a level of leverage.
Well, let me ask you about that. What caused it? What caused the speed up? I mean, we probably started talking about De'Aaron Fox as a potential, hey, please trade me guy in the preseason, because it just, we know how these contracts work. Yeah. But what sped it up to get it done before the deadline instead of kicking the can to the summer?
Well, I mean, there's a week to the deadline. I think there's financial aspects of this involved with as far as renegotiate and extend potentially in San Antonio. And the Kings can get a better package if it happens in the next week. I mean, they say I feel like this is commonly a baseball thing, but 1.5 seasons, trading a guy with 1.5 seasons compared to a full season compared to a half season. You want to strike while basically, I mean, you can have, to me, it's about what does San Antonio want, and maybe it's a little putting pressure on San Antonio and having the market know there's now more rivals that would be willing to go get De'Aaron Fox with 1.5 years left than if they knew this was like it's a directed half season. He's going to free agency and he might sign there anyway. So I just think there's a lot of factors at play. And it's deadline time. It's like, usually there's like one or two of these a year that I think shock a lot of people, but it's like deadlines create these type of scenarios.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what your thoughts are on, you mentioned the 7'4" reason. What do you think the fit will be for De'Aaron Fox out in San Antonio? Excuse me.
I think that'd be great. I'm higher on Fox than maybe some other people are. He really impressed me in that Warriors playoff series a couple years ago, and impressed a lot of people within the Warriors. Like, his game leveled up to the playoffs. Isolation, score. He was getting by everybody off the dribble. And I do think part of his desire to potentially go to San Antonio is an understanding that maybe, he's saying he wants to be on and he said this publicly, right? He wants to be on a perennial contender. And I do think there's a level of understanding from him that he's not necessarily a 1A on a perennial contender, right? He kind of not only needs a number two, but not like a sidekick. He kind of needs a guy above him. It's what he doesn't really have in Sacramento with Domantas Sabonis, right? And I think he sees what he can do, which is like isolation, guard, scoring, pick and roll, playmaking, as something that can accentuate what Wemby does, but Wemby also can sit on the back end, control the defense, do a lot of the stuff he doesn't. And I think Wemby, we'll see where his offense goes long term. I'm sure Wemby wouldn't admit this, but the one question I might have about him long term is like, is he ever going to be able to be, a go-to 28 point per game scorer in those tight moments? We'll see. I'm not saying no. He's definitely does a lot of interesting things. On a nightly basis, but it doesn't feel like he's going to need like a sidekick score that on certain playoff nights and certain matchups can go get 30. And Fox is that type of scorer.
Everybody needs one. I mean, Nikola Jokic right now is the best player in the world.
Right.
Steph Curry needs one right now.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Right.
The whole league.
And look, the Nuggets didn't start looking good until Jamal Murray played himself into shape. And I think that, if somehow De'Aaron Fox winds up in San Antonio, that's about as perfect a match as you can get. Before we get out of here, I want to ask you, because we're hitting the midseason mark, and you cover so much of the league, and you've kind of been in the midst of, I would say, a lot of the narratives you have gone through, the places that you're passing through every day. So, what is like a big picture thought or takeaway that you have from the first half of the season, outside of hey, it's super competitive and there's parity?
Well, the West, I don't think is that good. It's maybe it's like mild
in comparison to what the East.
So what everyone acts like it's just such Goliath, and I think it's like a bunch of flawed teams. I mean, you mentioned coming through the West. I see this Warriors team at 23-23, but it's like they're really not that far from like 5 or 6. And I'm not about to predict they're about to go climb there because I think they're so flawed that they're just going to sit around 500. But the fact is, with one piece and suddenly a nice little winning streak, you're right up there in that mix. Because like, think about this. Mavs are, in injury crumble mode. The Suns have had, just such a wobbly season to this point. The Lakers, like, net rating is horrible and all the numbers, people love to say that, but it's like, man, they're probably the 4th, 5th best team in the West right now.
They're 5th. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like we continue to talk about all these teams that have all these issues, but it's like, they're all like right in the mix. And I do understand like the Thunder is looking like a regular season monster, but even the team that is running away with the conference, I think still has to prove it to us in the playoffs.
Agreed.
So it's just, I don't know. I would say that's one thing. And then the other thing, and I remember this, people like to talk about how like it's a boring regular season, right? The NBA is a boring regular season. I remember this is right around the time Mike Brown got fired, but you mentioned it, like all these narratives and stuff going through the West. And I remember being on that 5-game homestand where every Kings loss and meltdown late felt like such a tense moment. And then I would go the next night and cover a Warriors team they're having this existential crisis where, I have to write about like this big picture, like where, what is happening. And it's like,
it's drama, Anthony. It's drama.
Well, and I'm like, no, the regular season's pretty interesting around here. I don't know.
Also, the games are really good.
Yeah.
Yes, although I did watch quite a Jazz rotation tonight, I gotta say.
Well, to be fair,
I'm looking at the starting lineup
Jazz
on the stat sheet tonight. But yeah, don't. Sorry, I'm a little bit jaded from the product I watched tonight. Generally, you're correct.
Yeah, you sound like Zena in our group chat when she was watching the same game, man. But you got to go back and watch the Rockets Hawks fourth quarter. It was good basketball. That's going to do it for today's show, folks. Thank you, Anthony Slater, for staying up late and joining us. Thank you, Zena Keita. As always, I'm Dave DuFour, and this has been the NBA Daily. Thanks for waking up with us.
It was an unseasonably warm winter's night in Glen Head, New York, as the Lehigh girls varsity team suited up for their home game. Red, white, black jerseys emblazoned with Nike logos, new sneakers on their feet, determination in their eyes. The opposing team, St. Joseph by the Sea, had come from Staten Island, through Brooklyn and Queens to Long Island's North Shore. The matchup was expected to be uneven, with Lehigh favored, but anything could happen. As the teams warmed up, the head coach from Lehigh approached the opposing head coach with an unusual proposition. One of her star players, number 13, was waiting for a very important phone call. If the phone rang during the game, they'd need to stop play, no matter what was happening, no matter who had the ball, and call a timeout. Was he okay with this? The opposing coach paused and considered the request. But given the situation, of course, it was fine.
Oh, yeah!
The game started. The phone sat on the bench, silent. Number 13 ran the floor, absolutely dominating.
Here we go, Pete! Good shot!
So at the end of the half, his team is in
By halftime, she'd racked up 16 points and 10 rebounds. All the while, the phone sat on the bench. The screen, blank. The ringer, dead silent.
Sometimes I don't even hear what's going on. Like during the game, it happens. You're just there in the moment and just play basketball. You just have fun. You know how you see little kids going to the gym and they have no idea what they're doing, just trying to dribble a basketball and shoot? I know, that's what makes me feel like I'm just there, having fun, playing basketball.
That night, Kate Koval was trying as hard as she could to shut out the rest of the world. Wearing number 13, she was the Lehigh player having an incredible game, and the one whose cell phone sat on the bench, a beacon ready to signal either hope or despair. As the second half started, the phone was still just a blank screen. The date was February 24th, 2022. Kate's home country, Ukraine, had just been invaded by Russia. And she had no idea where her parents were.